Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Light Zone Data Show. Today, we're going to talk about the 4 levels of analytics, and we're going to talk about data literacy. And we're going to address these topics with none other than Jordan Morrow, the godfather of data literacy. Welcome, Jordan.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk through this.
Well, allow me to introduce you and really explain to our audience why you're known as the godfather of data literacy. Well, guys, it's because he helped pioneer the field by building one of the world's first data literacy programs and just, driving thought leadership. Jordan is the head of data, design, and management skills at Pluralsight. That's a cool title, isn't it? And he's a trailblazer in the world of data literacy. He served as the chair of the advisory board for the Data Literacy Project, has spoken at numerous conferences around the world, and is an active voice in the data and analytics community. I've personally enjoyed his TEDx talk, Why Everyone Should Be Data Literate, but that's really just one of the many talks he gave that I really encourage you to listen to, of course, after this show. He has also helped companies and organizations around the world, including the United Nations, just build and understand, you guessed it, data literacy. Now, we're not found within his work of data. Jordan is happily married with 5 kids. Jordan is also an avid trail runner and loves fitness, entering and racing in multiple ultra marathons. I think that's what the medals in the back are for, at least some of them, and having fun adventures in the mountains. And Jordan, as I mentioned, I really enjoy your LinkedIn post as you're always posting beautiful photos from these adventures. And Jordan is also an avid reader, often reading or using Audible to go through multiple books at a time. You definitely have an impressive bio, I gotta say that.
Thanks.
So, Jordan, what kind of books are you listening to and reading?
Oh, yeah. So right
Multiple
now,
ones.
yeah. So right now, I just finished Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. I don't know if you've heard of that one or whatever. It's a brilliant book. I really like it. Listened to it on Audible, and I have a hard copy. I liked it so much I had to buy a hard copy so I could write in it, take notes, etc. So that's the one I just finished. I just started Tim Grover's Winning on Audible. I don't know if you've heard of Tim Grover. He was the personal trainer for Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, one of the biggest, most famous personal trainers out there, and how to develop that winning mentality and all of that. And then I've got the one I'm actually hard copy reading right now. I did a post on this the other day, is Noise by Daniel Kahneman. Those that know Daniel Kahneman, he wrote Thinking, Fast and Slow, won a Nobel Prize in economics with his friend and partner. And so now I'm picking up their next book called Noise, where it's all about critical thinking, thinking through things deeper, and how we allow biases and judgments and other influences, right? I think we like to think we freely think, but a lot of times our heuristics, our experiences, our rituals, all these things influence it. And so studying through critical thinking on that.
So I assume this would have an influence and a role in data literacy as well.
Absolutely. Like, so when you watch either my TEDx talk or listen to me speak, a lot of times I quote, I think all 3 are in there, maybe not in the TED talk, but I mentioned 3 C's of data literacy: curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. And I think that, like, for example, the pandemic was one of the world's greatest examples of lack of critical thinking. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way, but I think when you're inundated with data and you're not comfortable with data literacy and comfortable using it, all of us, including me, all of us can improve our critical thinking skills.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to say hi to Ravid. Such a pleasure to see the data literate king, Jordan Morrow. There you go. You have another title besides the Godfather.
Yes.
Data literate king.
Yeah, nice to see you, Robert. Thanks for joining.
So, well, let's talk about the 4 levels of analytics first, because I think it's important for everybody to know about. And I'm curious if you kind of need to go in, from one to another, you need to go through all of them to get that meaningful information out of your data.
Yeah.
So let's start with what they are.
Yeah, so the 4 levels, and the reason I love this is almost kind of that baseline foundation when I talk to organizations, because when we think of this data-driven world we live in, data is inundated, data is everywhere, it's being produced at rates we never could imagine. But data is just data, it just sits there, right? And until something effects itself on it or acts upon it, nothing happens with it, and that's analytics. And most organizations and individuals, I would say, but most organizations are trying to capitalize on their data, but they're really only using the first level of analytics. Now, the 4 levels are descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And the first 2 levels are more driven by the non-technical, and this is where the majority of people will be, is in those first 2 levels. And then the last 2 levels are going to be your very technical. So those are your predictive and prescriptive. And so, yes, in order to drive a holistic data strategy effectually, you have to have all 4 levels, but it doesn't mean they're split evenly. 95% of your data and analytical work will be in descriptive and diagnostic. The rest of it will be in predictive and prescriptive.
And would you say that you always start with descriptive first?
Yeah, usually. So I look at them as this progressive, kind of look at it as a staircase, right? Descriptive is what I call observational analytics. You're making an observation on something, describing what happened in the past, right? I ran a race, the company made X amount of dollars, etc. The second level, going up to that next progression, is really, to me, where the meat of data literacy comes in. It's this diagnostic is your insight level of analytics. This is where your descriptive analytic tells you what happened. Your diagnostic analytic tells you why it happened. And when we understand why something happens, there's your insight, right? There's how you make business decisions. You know the insight. Then the third level, once we know the descriptive and then the diagnostic, you can build predictions on it, which is your predictive level of analytics. And then finally, your prescriptive is where I jokingly say it's where the technology and the robots take over, right? It's where the data and the technology will do it for you. The way, real quick, the example I've always used, I actually stopped using it during the pandemic because it deals with medicine, but I've been using it for years. And that is, imagine that you're sick and you go to a doctor. The first thing you do is you describe your symptoms. You describe what is happening. You build a description around it. The second thing is the doctor will diagnose that description, right? So if you have symptoms and you have these things happening, you diagnose it. The third thing is, once they've diagnosed it, they predict what you could do to get better. And then sometimes they give you a prescription or have an external source to make things better. So similarly with data and analytics, like I don't think there's a hard and fast rule that says you have to start with one. But description is usually where organization starts. But 2, maybe more importantly, that's where most organizations are stuck. They don't really go beyond that. They like to think they do, but most of them are stuck at descriptive analytics.
And Avery Smith here, nice to have you on. Totally agrees. Descriptive is always first and provides a ton of value. Would you say that maybe the whole area of business intelligence kind of really is focusing on descriptive analytics?
Absolutely. So, and this is actually where one of these misnomers or I don't call it a paradox, but almost within data and analytics comes, because for years, right? And I was a part of this. My career took me at American Express to build a large Tableau shop there, where the main focus for a lot of companies was build these amazing data visualizations. And then they would stop. They wouldn't know where to go from that. They'd spend a lot of time building great descriptive dashboards. But all it would do is describe what was going backwards, not insight, not building predictions and all this. This is actually, to a degree, I would say, where my first thoughts about 8 years ago came for data literacy, was building a large business intelligence shop. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if they could do a little bit more? Like maybe some basic statistics, maybe some actual analytics, not just here's a dashboard. And when I built that original plan at American Express, I was just flat told no. A lot of people don't know that. They just said, no, maybe in the future, which I'm actually happy about, because had they said yes, I would have been stuck there doing it. But Click hired me to be basically an entrepreneur and do whatever I wanted. And so I started building data literacy, and then boom, had the world's first program, traveled the world, like you said, and was able to do a lot. But it's business intelligence. What I tell companies, because a lot of companies are still enamored there, it's not the end all be all. Even though they like to think, they get excited about powerful BI tools, you democratize them to everybody. It's just one small step in a holistic data strategy to truly being data driven.
So I want to ask you a couple of things about that. But first, I want to make sure that you know that Kate wants to disagree with you here.
I'm wondering where, Kate. She needs to type out the rest of that and say why she disagrees. But yeah, I mean, She might just be joking because she likes to do that too, but
I
that's
think
okay.
so. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Kate is a big jokester for sure. So what I wanted to ask first is how did you really get into the data literacy field? How did you come about it and then wanted to create a program about it?
Yeah, it was interesting. So going back to that story at American Express, it
Mm-hmm.
was not only was I in charge, I got hired into this group to this was really early stages. God, this is 2012, maybe 2013, where democratizing data, self-service analytics was really, really jumping ahead. And so I was not only tasked with, I had a couple data engineers building things and creating dashboards, all this, but I was also told you have to train everybody on it, which is fine. A lot of people might not know this about me. I went to school for a while to be a mathematics teacher. And so I
Mm-hmm.
like to teach, I like to be in front of people, helping them learn these things. And so I started to build this plan. And I built a full plan. Like, here were steps. This is tier 1, tier 2, all the way through basic statistics, teaching them how to analyze. And then I presented it to my EVP at the time, who's still one of the smartest people I've ever met, socially very awkward, but very smart. Like, if you've ever seen The Big Bang Theory, for anybody out there, she was very much like Sheldon, PhD in physics, way too smart for their own good. And I presented it and she said, no, you're not doing that. Maybe in the future, they're not ready for that. Didn't know what I was stumbling upon, though, right? The fact of the matter is they weren't ready for the visualizations we were building. They needed data literacy. So that thought never left my mind. And so American Express started to change my job. And I saw an open role at Click for an analytics curriculum manager. Wasn't much to it. Got on the phone with them, first interview, and they basically hired me on the spot and said, we want you to come build your vision. Basically got hired in and said, do whatever you want. And this was in 2016. And so I took my thoughts, my vision, everything that I was having, and started to build it. Well, that's June 2016. Fast forward to June or July of 2017. And Gartner, a lot of people on the call, of course, know who Gartner is, the research and analyst firm. In February of 2017, they wrote an article about data literacy, the first one. And then they found out some little nerd in Utah had been building it. And I had been building it for months. I spoke at our user conference, at Click's user conference, had standing room only in the rooms. And what was funny about that was we didn't tell Click that they hired me. So, because I got hired to do nothing with the product, we ended up not charging anything for my data literacy stuff. And then when I spoke at our user conference, I had 5 sessions. They had to bump it up to 6 because one sold out too big. Wow. And we said, okay, we have proof of concept. Then Gartner wanted to talk to me, which formed a good relationship with them. I still chat with people from Gartner and stuff. And then it took off. Here's the kind of validating time for me is when American Express came calling for help with data literacy. So that was kind of it worked. I remember when they did that, I'm texting my buddy who was a part of this data science team that I was a part of. And I text him, I say, remember that meeting where they told me no? Well, guess who just called? And it was a funny moment. We had a laugh about that.
I'm sure that felt good, right?
Absolutely.
And Kimberly here is mentioning that you can't be afraid to ask questions, even if you're intimidated by
absolutely.
Sheldon at work.
Absolutely. Ask every question. And yeah, she was, like I said, she ran, this person, she's at Amazon now, ran I believe the entire analytical group for the Caesars Palace Casino Group in Las Vegas. So, I mean, she was smartest person I know, but and that was fine. I didn't know what I was stumbling upon. That was like 7-8 years ago. And it took me a year or two later before I really got it going.
Yeah. Karma, as Susan is mentioning. And she also, is mentioning that I think your experience as a teacher explains your patience with Kate here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm surprised Kate didn't say to put a brown bag over my head, but that's an inside joke between her and I. So anyway.
Well, Kingsley feels good to be back. I've missed this show. Hello, George, and hello, Jordan.
Absolutely. Nice to see you,
Kingsley. Heather is mentioning that love your identification that data literacy is the bridge to elevating the analytics story.
Absolutely. I'd love to expand on that a little because you're saying it really well. In data and analytics, they're seen far too often as intimidating topics. They still are. When you talk to people, the moment I remember, so we'll talk about my book in a little, but right after it launched, I was actually running down one side from that trail with my friend, and we ran into a different friend of mine. And as we ran down, I had a friend say, "Congrats on your book. I think I'm too dumb to read it." And I'm like, whoa, 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 you're missing the point of what data literacy is for. It's the empowerment of everybody to be comfortable with data. We know that data scientists are data scientists. I love getting in statistics. I love reading analyses. I get that. 99% of people don't want to do that, and they don't need to do that. And that's that bridge. It's taking, and let's face it, data is a currency that's not going away. The more data that companies can effectively use, the more powerful those companies are going to become.
Absolutely.
So can we, and by the way, for anybody who watches or reads the book or whatever, from a career perspective, to put data literacy or the use of data on your resume is huge. To be able to say that I can use data in this day and age, they can't fill all the jobs that they need filled at this point. And so all these things kind of work themselves together.
So would you say there are different levels of being, let's say, data literate? That, you know, a data analyst wouldn't necessarily need to have the same skills as, you know, a manager would?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, in the one of the business domains. Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, the same thing with executives. It's almost like the 4 levels of analytics, right? The first 2 levels, descriptive and diagnostic, that's where 90 to 99% of people are going to play in the field of data and analytics, right? You're going to look at visualizations. You're going to build visualizations. You're going to look at all these things to get answers. We get that. Very few people are truly going to be building predictive analytics. And very few, even fewer, are going to use prescriptive. Unless you're good at coding, AI, ML, neural networks, all those things, you might not even go to that level. But the key to data literacy is that it gives you foundational thoughts. And maybe one of the better things to describe it as is conversational ability with all 4 levels. Because you might not build the predictive model, but you probably are going to have to use it, or you might be using it. So do you know how to interpret the results? And then the end all be all needs to be, can I make a decision with the data and analytics that are there? That's one of the things that I was taught early in my career of data and analytics by, he's now the CEO of Etsy, turned that company around. I worked for him at American Express. His name's Josh Silverman. And the vibe you got from him was, I don't care how pretty your PowerPoint or your visualization is. I don't care what it looks like, as long as I can get insight from it. And so I think we get enamored by powerful visualizations and all these things versus just understanding. Your skill might just need to be interpretation. Executives aren't building analyses. A data analyst is not doing statistics necessarily. So there are varying levels. I look at data literacy as almost this overarching umbrella, and then you find your spot under that umbrella to really just build your skill and move forward.
So I have a question that's, you know, I think it's not just American Express that's really struggling with this, right? To step out of the descriptive analytics and not just do descriptive analytics. Why do you think that is? I mean, the talent is there in terms of the technical skills. People are eager to want to create this, you know, get more insights out of your data, but it feels like their users they feel they're unready to dwell into it, or they don't trust the data yet. What do you think it is?
I think, and I'm going to actually take Kimberly Harrington's question and add it to it here. So she says, how do data literacy, data fluency, and data culture differ in your eyes? They all mold together and work together. The moment we try and silo any of those apart from each other, we're going to fail. And this is actually why every organization, let me rephrase that, every industry, every region of the world is struggling with true data and analytical adoption. A number I saw at the end of last year was about 20 to 30% of analytics projects are being adopted. It's not that, you know, yes, we could say trust in data is one, but I'm going to dive right into one of Kim's points here. The number one roadblock for data and analytics success is data culture. It has nothing to do with technical skills, the quality of data, any of that. Is your organization, like the rituals, the traditions, the habits, that's what make up the culture. And if they're not ready to add in the use of data, they push it aside. One reason that they're not necessarily ready to add it in goes right to data literacy, right? We found in studies that about 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 people are confident in their data literacy skills. So when an organization comes and says, we want to use data, we want you to use data, but they're not comfortable doing it, they don't have the skills to do it, the culture butts right up against it very hard, very quickly. Then that ties, now let's tie in that third one from Kimberly, and then I'll add in one final point. Data fluency, I actually call the secret sauce of data and analytics success.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is, how many times maybe you, George, or any of our listeners have ever been in a conversation and the person just stares at you blankly because you've lost them. They don't understand what you're saying. Data and analytics, that's going to happen far more often than probably a lot of different fields, because people don't go to school to learn about data. They don't go to school to learn about analytics. So with data literacy, if we can create a common language spoken throughout an organization around data, then people are confident or comfortable conversing with each other. Then data literacy improves and we get the culture on board. So all those things interact together to bring about what you just described. And like I said, it is very, very, very rare for me to find any organization in the world truly doing this well. The final underpinning that I'll get at is a lot of organizations do not have a true data and analytical strategy. And that data and analytical strategy needs to tie back to the business strategy, right? Sometimes their strategies, we're moving to the cloud. Why? Can you tell me why you're doing that? We're doing this. Can you tell me why? I remember meeting with a company, a large insurance, I should say, I think they're one of the largest insurance financial services firms. And they were walking me through this massive data learning that they were doing. And I came back to one question over and over again. I said, can you tie this back? Do you know what your business is trying to do with data? And they couldn't do it. And so the next step was not how do we refine your learning plan? It was for them to go out and learn what is the business trying to do. Because data literacy, data fluency, data culture, if we don't have a directed outcome that everybody's working towards, then what's the point?
Absolutely. And Kingsley here is mentioning that in the part of the world where I come from, I have headache reading people's texts and chats, for example. Well, it's hard for me to read this. I love this show. Somebody just introduced me, meaning, oh, yes. Thanks for clarifying that. But the majority of young adults fall into this group, and it's sickening. How do I handle this group of people? So I assume this maybe can get translated to data literacy as well. In fact, I don't know, maybe there's some bad data visualizations put out there, or the context is not being put on, or maybe we actually need to cater to the different audience that have maybe a shorter attention span, or different way of reading the data, or hearing these stories, right? So do you always need to have a mix of somebody needs to have a story being told to them, somebody needs to have some their table of rows and columns with all the details of the data that they want to look into, and just make sure that you're catering to most audiences?
So there's data storytelling might be the fastest growing field in data and analytics right now. And it's funny, I always land back to C. I don't know why, but I've got the 3 C's of data literacy, and I've got 5 C's for data storytelling. So data literacy, 3 C's, 5 C's for data storytelling. And one of them is context. And you have to understand the context, whether it's the audience. So if I'm talking to a group of executives about some sort of analysis or strategy, I'm going to approach that vastly different than I would a bunch of analysts that I'm talking about that same strategy to. And so context matters so greatly, especially in data literacy. So if you look at the definition of data literacy, the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data, reading to me is the most important characteristic, because if you can't read and understand it, what's the point? But the second most important characteristic is, can you communicate whatever analysis you just did? You could create the most amazing analysis in the world, and if you can't communicate it well, what a waste, right? Then it's gone. So you have to understand the audience. Understanding the audience and putting context to a data story might be the most important points, not the visualization, not the analysis, but do you know who you're talking to, and can you effectively communicate with them in a manner that works for them?
Absolutely. And Kimberly talks often about these 3 C's, curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking as well, that they often play a role into it. There are a lot of questions coming in, but I want to first ask you this. I want to give my time on the show. So have you ever encountered, companies or a bunch of projects in the data analytics sphere that they get left off, something gets created, an end result is being delivered, but then nothing is done with it? The people at the end is saying, okay, well, that's interesting, but
And then
no action is taken.
So that to me is a pure, maybe I should say, a lack of data literacy by the end user, right? There's two sides of a coin when it comes to an analysis. There's the preparer of the analysis who builds the great analysis, great communication, story, whatever. The flip side of that coin is the audience. Who is going to receive that? And I think we lose sight of, when we think of data literacy, a lot of times we're focused on the preparer of the data and analytics. But we have to understand what level of data literacy the audience has. Because if it's not, this is why when I build data and analytical strategies or data literacy strategies, there's a massive holistic approach to doing it for an entire organization, so that when you build that great analysis, like you just said, everything's buttoned up, it looks good, but then you deliver it and nothing happens. It's not that the analysis wasn't good. A lot of cases, it's going to be the fact that the end user who received it, they don't know what to do with it, right? This is why one of the biggest catchphrases during the pandemic was to become truly data-driven. Well, what does that even truly mean, right? Well, in a simplistic form, it means using data to improve your business. I mean, that's what it means. But so many people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to make a decision. Like, here's a good example. When I was at Click, I was working with one of Australia's largest financial institutions, and they were frustrated with the low adoption rate of the Click platform. And so my sales team was like, Jordan, can you come talk to them? And they wanted to do a full analysis of Click, Power BI, and Tableau. And so I took a step back and I basically told them, I was like, you can do that all you want, but the moment you switch from Click to another, you're going to be back here in 12 months, because your issue with adoption of a product has nothing to do with the product. That's what you're pinning it on, but it has everything to do with people's confidence in being able to use the data behind the product. Do they even know what they're doing? And when you talk to people like that, it flips a light bulb, right? And it flips a switch that says, or it should anyway, how do we improve both the product side of things, because you have to be trained there, you have to build good data viz and all of those things, but at the same time, the adoption of it. So it always twofold. It comes back to culture, right? Is the culture used to using data to make decisions? If they're not, these are the rituals, right? These are the habits, the traditions, and the rituals of an organization. If the habits and rituals, you have to weave it in there. If you don't, they're going to go right back to the way they've always done things. And then you have to bring in the data literacy. Do people even have a way to interpret it? Do they know what they're interpreting, et cetera?
A great example. Thanks so much for that. And Arvin has a great follow-up question here. In your experience, do you see the CDO, CIO prioritize data literacy in their agenda? And if not, which C-level executive is the most common title initiating data literacy?
So we are seeing, and it's a good question, because I get asked who owns data literacy all the time. Well, it's the C-suite. It better be the C-suite, or you're not going to get this off the ground. In organizations that have a CDO, CAO, or CDAO, for those who don't know, a CAO is a Chief Analytics Officer. Usually that's where I point to it. I say it's got to be them. They're the ones who own the data strategy, tying it back. If they don't have a CDO or CAO, yes, you see the CIO or the CTO kind of take charge. My only issue with that is, and I'll tell companies, you need to go hire a CDO or CAO, because a CTO has a different agenda, right? They're all about technology. A CIO has a different agenda. And so as much as we want them to get behind data literacy, and they might fully believe it, they might want to, et cetera, without truly that being a part of your agenda, then it can get hit by the wayside. And so every company should have a CDO, let's just face it. Now, I get that I'm a data nerd and I want that to be the case, but we are starting to see it. Like the other day, I met with a CDO of a large investment firm, and it was just a great conversation, because as I'm walking through the plan I want their company to use, et cetera, he understood it, right? Because his mindset is trained differently. If you go to a CTO, I might have to do different conversations. This goes back to that question about understanding the audience. Oh, so you're a CEO leading this charge. Okay. I have to talk about the business benefits here. You're a CTO. Okay. Let's talk where technology is brought in. You come over here. You're a CDO. Tell me your data strategy. This is how it weaves in. And it becomes just a much more fluid conversation.
Have you ever encountered for a bunch of the C-level executives to own this as a whole, and not just have the one sponsor and not be under just one's responsibility, but for all of them to come together, even the CTO with their own role in the tool and its deployment and rolling out, to make sure that they're all playing together and they're really supporting data literacy?
Absolutely. In fact, in one organization I was working with before I made the move from Click was Arizona Public Services. Smaller company, 5,000 to 6,000 employees. There still is a person that leads the charge. And that was, I think, a VP of data who was leading the charge. But the way I kicked off data literacy for them was meeting with their executive team over 2 days. I think it was two 2-hour workshops over 2 days, walking them through our thoughts, our plans, getting their ideas, et cetera, getting all of them on board. So they didn't have their lead was a VP. And I always say your lead has to be the highest person up you can get who's in charge of data, but you have to have the C-suite involved. And that's what we did with this company was we had their VP of data owning it, wanting to put it in place. And then in the meetings, I think we had the CTO, CIO, CMO, CEO, just talking them through it. And they had good questions because they had bought in. That's the other key is you have to make sure the C-suite is bought in. If they haven't bought in, that's going to be like pushing up one heck of a hill.
Just want to take a sidestep here and just address this question that was asked earlier by Mahesh, and he's wondering if you have heard about cognitive analytics, and if so, can you just talk a little bit about it, where it's being used and how the business is adapting to cognitive analytics?
Yeah, Mahesh, I saw that come through a couple times too. Cognitive analytics, for everybody that might not have heard of it, is think of it as advancing machine learning, et cetera, putting human type tasks, human type abilities, human different things into the machines in the data. So it's stuff that's been around for a while, and now you're calling it's cognitive analytics. There's neural networks within data, right? All of these terms. To me, it really boils down to almost that third and fourth level, but mainly that fourth level of analytics to a degree. And as companies, I do see over the next few years more advances and then more deep investment in things like machine learning, cognitive analytics, where whether it's supervised or unsupervised learning, whatever it is, taking the data in. The key to it, and I always come back to this, and you'll see why, is you can build all this cognitive analytics into a business, and you're going to see that happen, especially the hype that is surrounding machine learning and AI and cognitive analytics, all these different things. That hype gets companies to buy into it. But the same thing is going to happen without a cohesive data literacy strategy, so that when the cognitive analytics are built, if you want them adopted, the business better understand what's going on. This goes back to data fluency, culture, data literacy. And so I do think we're going to start to see more and more investment there. I think we're going to start to see tools become even better. You look at Click's cognitive engine, which will predict visualizations for you and things of that nature. It has in the past. But you have to be able to adopt it. A good example of this is traveling to South Africa once, meeting with a company, and a guy raised his hand and he said, is all this technology going to make us lazy? And I said, well, you have to look at it maybe a little bit different than that. Let's say there was something that you in the past would build that would take you 3 hours. Well, let's then say the machine can do it in 15 minutes. Don't look at it as being lazy. Look at it now that you have 2 hours and 45 minutes to do more diagnostic analytics, digging in, finding the insight, figuring out when the machine built it, how can I implement this in doing this? But again, the underpinning of it all is, do you have the right strategy and the right data literacy, or all the millions or however much money is being spent on these cool new things, is it just going to go by the wayside? And so that's why this whole data driven, this whole everything that you're building has to be put into work through a strategy. And if it's not, good luck to you.
I like how you're putting this, because I always read when I'm reading about the 4IR, the fourth industrial revolution, all the worries that how we'll become lazier, how our jobs will disappear, and things like that. But I like your way of viewing things. That, well, no, it's just freeing up some time for us to do more meaningful things.
Absolutely. I've got a friend who came from the big four accounting firms. He worked at KPMG for years. And he and I were talking about the advances that data and analytics have for his field. So he was an auditor, and he might be auditing a big company that would require 10, actual accountants to audit it. Now you can break it down to only have 4. So we're talking about those other 6 are now looking at mergers and acquisitions. They're doing more in-depth work versus pulling papers out and signing them and making sure they look good. An algorithm can do that, versus now you've got 6 people able to dig deeper into numbers. So I'm very much the glass is half full kind of guy. And that it's very easy to say, oh, it's going to make us lazy, it's going to take jobs. No, the predictions are more jobs are going to be created, just like every industrial revolution. It's how you approach it that matters. This is why part of my studying when it comes to books is like listening to Tim Grover's Winning, right? You either have a winning mentality or you don't. And are
Mm-hmm.
you attacking things or are you letting things attack you? Those are your
Mm-hmm.
two options. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think there's definitely a positive light in all of this.
Right. I know there was a story with that we have two worlds inside of us, and one is really positive and all these positive thoughts and anything that you can think about, and the other one is just obviously the opposite. And really it depends the one that you feed. That's the one that's going to
Absolutely.
grow. And I think same goes with our data analytics program and what we want to do with it and our data strategy and everything. But even so, Heather has a question here. And why don't data analytics strategies really tie back to the business strategy? Why is the silo? Is it because of how we have it structured that maybe the data analytics might fall under the CTO? So then it's a different alignment there. It's still that cultural thing. We're not there yet. But in a company where both do exist, why is there still that silo in place?
Yeah, it does come back to culture, and it comes back to, and I hate saying it this way, but it's true, the old way of doing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is why the data storyteller, a lot of people don't realize maybe what the data storyteller, also called the data translator, data interpreter, what that job is actually defined as is the individual who can bridge the gap between the business and the data and technology. That's what
Mm-hmm.
that job is defined as, where historically the business didn't need to know what was going on with the data and technology. They just invested in it. The data and technology was just trying to make sure things are running, things are good. They didn't need to worry about the business. Now we're at a point where people are like, oh, well, that's not the way to do it. And so, but that old way of doing things, and we see this all the time, it's almost, and I hate to say it this way, but think back to the industrial revolution and Luddites, right? The people who didn't want to progress forward. Same thing is there's a slow shift. Some companies have taken that shift on quickly, heavily. They might have gotten it wrong, but they're iterating, right? They're trying to improve on it. But a lot of it does have to do with the old way of doing things. Data was just seen as this nice to have. Do we really have it? The example I use is almost this COVID example, right? Before the pandemics and before the shutdowns, a lot of companies were getting into data and analytics. In fact, I just wrote about this. Almost like when you get into a swimming pool, very few people just run and jump in without touching the water, right? They tiptoe in and they slowly get in, etc. Every so often, like I have one son who just runs and jumps in without touching anything. One time he did that and the pool was about 55 degrees and he was not warm. It was in January, we're in Florida, it was freezing. And we learned very quickly that that was not the right one to do that to. But very few companies were doing that. Very few companies had fully immersed themselves in data and analytics. Well, guess what COVID was? It was the punk dad like myself who, when my kid's tiptoeing in, shoves them in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what happened during the pandemic is I always thought that my calendar would lighten up a little bit because I wasn't traveling. It got busier. And it's because COVID showed companies these gaps. They showed companies that the old way of doing things, when you want to be data driven, is not going to work. So to Heather's point, things are improving. It's a slow slog at times. Things are improving. You're getting executives to buy in, but then there are executives that it's still butting your head up against hard and trying to figure out how to tap into them. And it's tough. And I hate to say it this way, but the companies who don't get on board in the next couple of years could be the ones who fall by the wayside 5 to 10 years out.
Well said. I gotta say, I really love all your analogies and explanations. It just makes everything
Good.
so much easier.
Good.
And Arvin here, he's saying that since you had talked about your fridge talking to you speech and TED Talk, I've been a believer on data literacy, and
So
since then I
Arvin,
learned a
that
lot.
fridge, we just remodeled our main level. The fridge you're talking about is right there. That's the fridge I mentioned in my TEDx talk right there. It's about to go upstairs today or tomorrow. Finally getting it done, but I appreciate that.
And I just want to put it out there for people that want to learn more about data literacy and becoming data literate, that they should check out your book, which
Awesome.
I'm hoping to have it here on the screen. Be data literate, the data literacy skills everyone needs to succeed. And it just came out this year, I believe.
Absolutely. It came out in March. It's selling well, which still people will say, how's it doing? I'm like, shockingly, it's selling really well, actually. And so, I wrote this, I'd had in my mind to write a book for a while, and I just didn't want to self-publish. And then I don't know if a lot of people know who Bernard Marr is. He's become a friend and colleague of mine. and he videoed me. He asked me some questions on his YouTube channel. Well, his publisher, and he's written, I don't know, 4 or 5 bestsellers, right? His publisher saw the video, shot me an email and said, "Do you want to write a book?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so wrote this one. So this one is truly around how individuals, it talks about organizations, it talks about culture, 4 levels of analytics, but really how to truly be empowered by data literacy. A little secret is book 2 is on its way. I'm in the middle of writing it now. I won't give out the secret of what that one's about, but think of it as a continuation of book 1 on a larger scale. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm happy that it got a good reception. I'm happy that it's taken off. And my whole goal is to make the world as nerdy as me. I don't know if I'll get everybody as nerdy as me, but if I can progress them in some way to be nerdier, that's what I should say, then I'm happy to get them nerdier.
Well, congratulations on your book, and I think we're all looking forward to the new one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hope to have you back on the show to talk about that one as well.
Absolutely. And if any, like, I know you were mentioning how people can learn more, reach out to me. I'm an open book. I'm on LinkedIn. Like you said, I'm always posting about anything from critical thinking, etc. And oh, if it's okay, George, I want to address one question just came through. Data literacy is not a trend, but a necessity. That's Manjunatha. Yes, it's absolutely not a trend. It's here to stay. Because you look at it, and some people have gone as far to say it'll just be as common as numeracy, right? Is this ability to use data is not going anywhere. Technology is getting more advanced. It's going to hit us harder and harder. So yeah, you could say it's kind of my mission to empower people to use it. I love doing it. I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, I think we need to tackle this from as young as we can tackle it and have it in schools as a subject, and just keep on going. It needs to be as imperative as reading and writing.
Absolutely, completely agree. And Kate, I'll put a shout out. Kate and I actually wrote a children's book on data literacy a couple years ago, and so it's one of those where the Department of Education used my help last year. I was a part of a panel with them recently. You're exactly right. My kids, it's kind of a joke, but when they go to parent-teacher conferences, each teacher's like, "Oh, they don't have a problem with math," and I'm always like, "Good, they better not." And so, but the reality with it is that we always look at education programs. What are the top things that you could teach a child to succeed as an adult? Financial literacy, data literacy. These are the things that should be in the curriculum to help kids be best prepared for their career when they get out. And a final side note is, what I tell people, I get asked the question a lot, what should I be studying? And that a lot of times comes from people either in their graduate programs or their undergrads who are taking and studying data science. And I said, your program will take you through all the technical courses that you need. Don't forget the soft skills. So then I send them, they need to be taking courses around communication, leadership, etc. Because what we find is the other gap that you see in data and analytics skills is people don't have those. They're good at the technical, but do they know how to lead a team? Can they communicate properly? To your point, can you bring in stories and analogies that tie to the data? And that's where a lot of focus is lost right now, but where we need to push it back to.
Another thing to your point on the skills, I think really data, we're not just encountering it at work. So we don't just need to be data literate for work, but really for us as citizens in our day-to-day lives. We have data surrounding us everywhere. I mean, we would definitely care if we look at our bank account and it's a lot lower than we expected, right? So
absolutely. Well, look at the pandemic. How every single day people were hit with numbers, charts, visualizations, and they got sick of it. They got sick of it to the point where they just didn't care. And during a pandemic, and this goes also back, again, there's 2 sides to everything. You got the audience getting sick of it, but the presenters needed to do a better job of making it either factual, but 2, not inundating people and overboarding them. Because when you burden them too much, it's going to push them away, and that's what we saw. And when you're dealing with a virus and things like that, that's a problem. So this is why data literacy is just such an important topic.
Well, thank you so much for being an advocate for the importance of data literacy and really being the godfather of it all. Now, in closing, I do want to just make this straight. And Kay wants to mention that the brown bag was your idea. She has proof.
Well, we could go back to that, but I know what video I think she's talking about. So I was on one of her videos, and she made a comment too, so we'll have to see if she wants to bring that forward, and she knows probably what I'm talking about.
All right. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. And Jordan, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. Always enlightening. Please follow Jordan on LinkedIn. He's sharing a lot of great content, and make sure you're going to check out his book, Be Data Literate, available on Amazon and in a bookstore near you. All right,
Thank you.
everybody. We'll have a great Thursday and Friday next, and a long weekend after. So goodbye, everybody.